debating, interviewing. You know, that's what they doing. Stick around. It's about to get all roomy up in here. Remote Ruby starts now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Remote Ruby. I am Andrew Mason, and I am joined by Chris Oliver on our 300th episode. Chris, what's up?
300.
300.
It's crazy. I wish Jason was here. He almost made it to 300.
Almost.
Almost.
He got defeated by the Persians, but we are Sparta.
Yeah.
All right. I'm so ashamed that I said that. I'm like, God. All right. Starting off great.
Yeah, we're talking about this a couple weeks back. We're like, you know what? We should just see if we could answer some listener questions or something. Do something fun. I didn't remind people. I sent it out a few places like Discord, and I don't even know if I posted on X or Blue Sky. I think I posted on LinkedIn too, but we got like 12 questions from some people that we're going to dig into and answer. But yeah, also feel free to follow up and tag us in a post and ask questions, and we'll try and answer some more. But thought that could be a fun way to do our 300th episode.
Depending on how this goes, maybe this becomes a recurring segment every once in a while.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy too. Like, I know we haven't hit every single week, but 300 divided by 52 is 5 3/4 years, almost 6 years.
So
podcasts.
The first Remote Ruby podcast, episode number 1, June 8th, 2018, 6 years ago.
2018. Wow. That's crazy.
I was either just about to or just had graduated college.
I thought you were going to say be born.
No, yeah. I was just born. I know. I'm a millennial, so I was not born in 2018. Trust.
Man, it's insane to think it's been that long already.
I can't remember exactly when I came on. Hold on. I got to Google. I was a guest first on the show, and it was joined by Andrew Mason. That page doesn't exist. Cool.
It's hard to search for that episode now that you are
September 20th,
all the time.
2019 was when I came on as a guest and joined, I think probably at the end of that year. At the end of that year, I remember because I was at RubyConf in Nashville when y'all asked if I wanted to join.
Yeah.
It was at that conference. So that's when it all started, dude.
It's always fun looking back and doing something like this for that many years. There was a time I remember graduating from college and I was like, you know what? I've never done anything for more than like 4 years total. You're in high school for, some people are in high school for longer than 4 years.
True and fair.
But in general, 4 years was like the longest I'd ever done one thing. Like I'd been programming, but like I did some basic in grade school and some visual basic and whatever. But I wasn't like consistently doing one thing for that long. And that's like what you see is the people who stick it out and figure out how to be consistent for that long. They tend to be the ones that hit some sort of quote unquote success with it. Like we just record a podcast and it still amazes me that anyone listens to us.
Yeah, same. Honestly, yeah. I used to not think that because when I started, I was still a fan. I still remember like listening to podcasts when I was still in college and I just learned about Rails and being like, I don't understand. Like these people are so smart. Like I don't know how I'd ever get to this level. And I think this is probably my longest commitment as well. I've been doing this for like 5 years now with y'all. And I'm not a commitment person. So that's a long time for me.
It is a grind for sure at some point. That was part of the reason why we wanted to have you as our third person. Cause the two of us showing up every week was just like, well, not a lot changed since last week. What are we going to talk about this week? And if you were not feeling it, I was not feeling it, whatever. When there's two hosts, you're screwed. You can't just like record a podcast by yourself. You could, but like it just is weird. And so that gave us the tendency to like skip a little bit too easily at a certain point where we were just getting tired or didn't have any creative ideas or whatever. And So 3 hosts really made that nice. But I also like the simplicity right now of 2 hosts where we just show up whenever we want and we don't have to coordinate as much, which is also great.
I actually remember one of those like breaks y'all took like before I joined the show, and it like pissed me off because there was like a long gap between episodes, and I'm like, dude, I'm going back re-listening to old ones. Dude, which reminds me, there's an episode y'all did really early on that I've always wanted to do, and I'm gonna bring Jason back on it. We're gonna do it, and it was a game show. Bring Drew on.
Yeah, I was gonna say we've been trying to get Drew on for I don't know how long. And his excuse is he doesn't have anything to talk about. But if there's a game show, there's no other person to have other than Drew. So.
I think y'all did trivia. I'm gonna have to re-listen to the episode, and we'll have to cook up a new one because that was my favorite episode of the show, and I've always said I wanted to do it again, and we never have, and we're gonna have to do it.
That's great. You may have inadvertently answered one of these questions.
I think so.
But let's dig in. Kevin's the first one. I'll take this and ask the question, but we can both answer. What's the biggest change you've seen in the world of Rails since you started the podcast? I don't even remember what version of Rails we were on in 2018, you said?
I was going to say it was maybe just 5.2 because that's when I first started writing Rails. And I remember 5.2 was the thing that we were trying to migrate to.
5.2. Released on April 9th, 2018. Key features including active storage, built-in Redis cache store, updated Rails credentials. Woo!
5 was Webpacker, I think.
That's
or was 5.2
right.
Webpacker? It was either 5 or 5.2.
Rails 5 was released 2016, introducing Action Cable, API mode, and everybody's favorite TurboLinks 5. Whew! Also, going back to Rails 4, Rush and Doll caching and TurboLinks. Oh, wow. And Rails 4 was when Active Resource and Active Record Observer and other components optional by splitting them as gems. So those kind of got deprecated way back then. Interesting. I had some applications when I first started learning Rails that were using Active Resource, which was, if anybody doesn't know, that was like API clients.
Okay.
Kind of looked like active record models and would talk to another Rails app and use their things. But Active Resource was not a perfect, you can't join tables and things like that with Active Resource. That is an API request, and that is very different than a SQL query.
Right.
So it was not as good of a fit as hoped and was deprecated way back then. But yeah, wow. So Rails 5.1 was released in April 2017, introducing JavaScript integration changes, management of JavaScript dependencies from NPM via Yarn, optional compilation of JavaScript using Webpack, rewrite of Rails UJS to use vanilla JavaScript instead of jQuery, system tests using Capybara, encrypted secrets. So that was pre-credentials. Parameterized mailers. Oh man, that's a feature that like I can't live without. A unified form with helper replacing the form tag and form for helpers. There are a lot of changes since that. Because Rails 5.1, 5.2, 5 in general like made some massive changes. And then Rails 6 made Webpack default.
Yeah, Rails 5.1 was released with optional Webpack support, and the Webpacker Gen 6.0 made it the default.
Yikes.
Set Webpacker as the default for JavaScript assets. The applications still use sprockets to manage all their asset types. Yes, I remember that.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And then import maps in 2021.
Man, there's some stuff that has changed. Like 6.1 introduced the per database connection switching and horizontal sharding. That was like Eileen's huge contribution, extracting that out of GitHub and stuff. And like that in 6.1 was cool and some people used it, but like the solid stuff that we have today would not be possible without that.
Yeah.
Like none of that would be. So that's pretty sweet because otherwise you'd be shoving all that stuff into your primary database, which would be awful.
Eileen's the GOAT. I think she's one of like 2 or 3 people that I see at conferences all the time and I'm still too like shy to like say hi to.
I feel that. I'm like just
Yeah, I'm
you
like,
know,
you
a
seem
bit
busy.
starstruck.
Like, you're too smart. You seem busy. Like, I don't want to interrupt what you got going on. Like,
I feel that totally.
what would you give as like a single sentence answer as to what the biggest change has been?
Biggest change, I would say the JavaScript client side piece is the biggest change, where we went from literally like jQuery to modern JavaScript with Webpack to modern JavaScript without Webpack. That has changed so much. And there was CoffeeScript and stuff in there at some point. But aside from that, honestly, like the small polish of things in Rails, the form with helper and all of that has been wonderful. There's been so many improvements there. And I'm like, it's hard not to say the front end again, because thinking back to doing a lot of the regular features, we would use like remote JavaScript, and they were impossible to debug because if there was an error, the like JavaScript would run, but there wouldn't be any console log errors because it was just like eval or something. Yeah, it was terrible. And thinking about it, it's like we had turbo links since 2013. You know what was the bane of all of our existences? That TurboLinks didn't handle forms.
Yep.
And you were just like stuck without a way to properly handle the complete thing. Like you got single page app-esque functionality with TurboLinks, but that was only for navigation. But forms, definitely a part of navigation, I would say. So it's one of those things where Rails has introduced some killer features: action mailbox, action text, active storage. Thank God that we have like a built-in official way of doing file uploads. That's awesome, because it used to be kind of painful to use paperclip,
Carrier
Shrine,
wave.
and carrier wave.
Yeah.
And like there were a bunch of different options. They all worked differently. They were hard to migrate to and from. And having like an official way of doing it is great. But it also, as you look at all these features, like they took a few years to get polished at the framework level to handle like many use cases, because they all got extracted from like what Basecamp needed or what Hey needed or something. And they would be a little bit too narrow of a focus. The file uploads with active storage didn't really support public files, period. And that was like quite a pain point for anyone who was excited about adopting that. So over time, we got a lot of polish to it. But I still feel like the biggest thing has to be how the front end is handled with the move from TurboLinks to Hotwire that we have today.
Yeah,
So-
I would agree. I think I'm not going to reiterate everything you just said, but yeah, the way we handle JavaScript assets, biggest change overall. And then the second biggest, SPAs were the biggest thing when I started programming. And Nate and I worked on Seamless Reflex for a long time. And it was really cool to see like the evolution of starting off with JavaScript and requests and these weird templates and blah, blah, blah. And then you move, then Seamless Reflex and WebSockets, and now to Turbo. It's been a really interesting evolution. So yeah, I basically agree.
What happens when a developer decides to record his own podcast ad? Let's find out. I'm Adam from JudoScale, and at JudoScale, there's no marketing team, no salespeople, and no customer support. I mean, we do have customer support, but it's just us, the developers. That's why our support is top-notch. Anyway, we're JudoScale. We're the autoscaler that actually works. We do it better than anyone else by tracking the right metrics and checking those metrics more frequently. And we wrap it all in a beautiful UI with powerful and intuitive controls. We work with hosting platforms like Heroku, Render, and Amazon ECS to gracefully handle your traffic spikes and backed up job queues. If you want that peace of mind and a much lower hosting bill, you should check us out. Visit judoscale.com/remote Ruby for your special gift as a remote Ruby listener. That's judoscale.com/remote Ruby.
Let's do from John. How do you stay up to date with Rails ecosystem changes? I don't think we really need to harp on this.
You
We
just
don't-
listen to Remote Ruby and
I was
that's
gonna
it.
say, you read resources, you follow Reddits, you find like these link sharing services in the Ruby ecosystem, you go on Discord servers, you read release notes. But how much do you need to do? I'm not sure.
That's the thing. You can stay on top of the latest stuff, but if you can't use it, then it's like not that helpful. So I, over time, have shifted how I keep track of things. Big Binary has a blog. Saloon blog has often, they're monitoring the Rails commits for you and then giving you highlights. This is coming in Rails 8. This is coming in Rails 8.1. This is coming in Rails 9. That is a great way to kind of just have a filter of here's new stuff that's coming and we can stay up to date at a high level. But I don't need to watch every commit like Raphael does. Actually, these days, I actually like to do that because I can then test my code against that. We're maintaining Jumpstart, so we need to be aware of what's coming in Rails 8.1 and so on. Those are also great ways for me to find stuff to contribute back to Rails. So these days, and I forget, was it RailsConf or RubyConf this past year that Raphael gave a keynote and mentioned he just started reading every single commit every day on the Rails repository. And that's how he became the Rails policeman. And I was like, that's super smart. And I totally could do that, but I never even thought of that.
And
so
you
now
could
I do
totally
that.
do that easily. Like you could set up something to push the new commits to a Discord server so you could read them, or there's so many things.
Summarize it in an email.
Yeah, there's so much you could do to like automate around that. But at the end of the day, it's really just, I think, reading code.
Yeah, just find a feed. Even if you just follow like r/Rails on Reddit, and that's the only thing you do, you'll be in a pretty good spot. There's a bunch of different ways, and it really depends on what your goals are. I feel like if you just want to be aware of what's coming, you can follow those blogs, Reddit, whatever. People are doing the day-to-day monitoring of all the little details and changes. But sometimes I'd rather just wait until a pull request for 8.1 gets merged, but then it gets reverted and undone, and then they take a different approach, or maybe it never happens. And so just letting other people monitor that for me can be very nice. Save me a lot of time and effort.
Yeah, there's a lot of resources out there. You just need to look for them. I'll do the next one. Danny Kim, what are some good resources for someone new to Ruby, for someone new to Rails, for debugging Ruby on Rails code? If you are someone who's like, I need to learn how to debug my Ruby on Rails app, I think your real question is, I need to learn strategies in order for debugging. This is one of those concepts in programming that is the same kind of across languages. Like regardless of the tools you use, you need to learn how to debug before you can debug effectively. And there's tons of books and resources and articles and guides out there. So I would learn how to effectively debug language agnostically first, like how to think about that code. And then you can like start looking into tools specifically for Rails. You can use VS Code's like debugger. I think right now I would say everyone should be using the debug gem.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Yeah,
there's a lot of great articles and posts like Stan that we are going to get Stan on this show. Don't worry. As soon as our schedule slows down, we are traveling a lot. As soon as our schedule slows down, we are going to have Stan on the show to talk about all the stuff he's working on. But use the debug gem. If you're like, I need a tool to debug my Ruby on Rails code, use the debug gem. But learn how to debug effectively, I think.
Yeah, I think some little tactics on that are when you see the big stack trace, don't freak out. Actually read it. It's printed out for a reason. If the stack trace wasn't useful, it wouldn't be there. So go through that when something blows up and find the last line of code that you wrote, and then go look at the next line of code in whatever framework it is or library, which is probably Rails or some gem, and then go poke at it. Read that line of code, then see what it's trying to do with the inputs you gave it. Then go read the next line of code until it gets to the eventual line where it blew up and gave you an error, and start understanding the logic of what you gave it, because clearly the input you gave it was not what it was expecting, and that's why it threw an error. So you can then take that opportunity to go wrap your head around, like, what was Rails expecting me to give in this function call or whatever? And you will very quickly learn the issue, and you can always bundle open to go put a binding IRB or debugger inside of that library. The best part about Ruby is that nothing is, well, I mean, there are C extensions and stuff, but other than those things, you can drop into any gem, find its source code, throw a debugger in there, binding IRB, whatever you want, try, who cares, something. And then you can poke around and see like what methods are available here. What is the value that I passed in. Why is that not working the way I expected to? And you can use that as your strategy to learn debugging, because really debugging is that's all it is. I gave some input, it didn't work. What was it expecting, and how is it applying this, set of operations on my input, and why did that not work? And if you can figure out the steps that are happening, which your Rails stack trace gives you an interactive way to click on that line of code and then see exactly what it was doing. It pulls it up. You don't get the full context, so you don't get to see these other methods and things, but it gives you so much that you can then just go poke around at. And then all of a sudden, Rails isn't scary. No gem is scary at a certain point, because you're like, well, okay, it blew up. I use these steps and I go find out what the issue was, and there we go. That's not always the case. Sometimes you have things running in threads or in parallel or whatever, and you have concurrency issues, and things can be really tough to debug on some of those things. But there are ways to do that too, and people write blog posts and stuff about that. But for basic debugging, it's just those set of steps. Check what you gave it, check what it expected to do, and figure out the difference. And there you go. That's debugging. It's really not too bad.
And learn
it just
to
feels scary as hell.
Learn how to get bisect.
Yeah, that type of debugging is very helpful when you're like, something blew up in production. And when it's in production, it's much tougher. But then you want to write, this is how you get better at testing too. Blows up in production, you recreate that situation in a test, blow it up in development the same way, and then you can debug it, fix the bug, and you've also learned how to get good at writing tests. And you end up with a better, more robust application at the end of the day. Honeybadger helps you deploy with confidence and be your team's DevOps hero by combining error, uptime, and performance monitoring in one simple platform. It's free to get started, and setup just takes a few minutes. Be the hero your team needs. Suit up at honeybadger.io. That's www.honeybadger.io. I got the next one here. Genre asks, what is the biggest pain you are experiencing in your day-to-day jobs? He's looking for new cool stuff to build with Jumpstart Pro.
Build a new Stripe. Next question.
Ooh. Whatever you hear us complaining about week to week, month to month, those are good ones.
I don't really have anything off the top of my head that I can say, really.
Yeah, I feel like there are those types of things that are big projects, like payments are too complicated. But there are lots of other things around that too, where it's like, what if I want to experiment with pricing for GoRails? And let's imagine we want to sell, what if we want to sell an individual screencast for $5, or you can subscribe for $20 a month and get access to everything. That's still a pain in the butt to implement and to experiment and try. And I feel like in a similar vein, like the A/B testing tools that have JavaScript and whatever, we could still use another level of abstraction to make building products faster. Hell, we're still dealing with HTTP requests. And for the most part, at the end of the day, that stuff doesn't really matter, because you really want to be operating on I click this button, I get access to these private things. I submit this form, it charges my card. Now I have access to paid products or whatever. And as developers, AI is going to hopefully get us more in that direction. But the underlying technical details of HTTP probably in the future don't matter that much. We'll have a even bigger abstraction layer. So I don't know. I always look at it that way, where I'm like, it's too hard to build a slide over and have keyboard navigation and all the ARIA attributes and whatever. And there's an opportunity for that. There's anything that you feel like when you're building it, it's too much of a pain. That's an opportunity, but you got to be able to be aware of that feeling of frustration while you're working, and then write that down as maybe there's something here.
Yeah.
It's tough.
I think it's easier to find your problems than to find ours. Our problems are very nuanced. It would be easier for you to find a problem you have and try to solve that. Find a community that you like. For me, that would be Mac OS automation and productivity groups. I like that stuff. Go into those, listen to what those people are talking about, build products based on like needs that are missing. So in the same vein, go to those Ruby and Rails resources we talked about earlier, find common problems. I think Reddit would be a good place to do that. Find common problems and then see if you can solve them.
I like that a lot. The two ways I think about building products are kind of solve my own problems where I'm frustrated, make that easier, because guarantee you, I am not the only one frustrated implementing payments or dialogues or whatever it is. There's always a sign there that I'm probably not the only one, and that's good. But then also, if you have somebody who's successful with something and they're struggling with things, treat it like you're consulting for them, but you're going to build a generic product that could solve it for somebody else. That's also another good way of doing things. I was just watching Patrick McKenzie, Patio 11, old MicroConf talk about him building Bingo Card Creator and then his appointment reminder product. And it's like, know somebody that has like a hair salon that's struggling to remind people to come in for their hair appointments. Because if they don't, then they lose money, and that's awful. So then you can build a solution for them by themselves. But if you make it into a product that any hair salon could use, there you go. Now you have a business on your hands, as opposed to just being a consultant, only helping one person at a time. You can try to be a consultant to learn the market, but also turn it into a reproducible product that could help many people instead.
Next question from Carmen. Why are fibers and async not so popular in Ruby? I'm back to Ruby after more than 10 years of Python as an AI scientist and engineer, and async IO is very popular there. It is a fundamental building block for high performance and IO bound applications like streaming from LLMs. Love what you guys do, by the way. Ciao. Like, this question was really interesting to me. It stuck out to me when I was reading this because I was like, that's a really good question. And I'm not sure because, and I think if anything, it's like, I don't see a lot of people talking about them. I'm not entirely sure when I would need them. And maybe that's because I don't have a problem that requires them yet.
Well, the thing that you do have, and I think this stands for most Rails developers, is you've got Mike Perham and you've got Rosa, and they take care of all of our async stuff for us with Sidekick and Solid Q. And we've got so many other people like Ben Shelton working on Good Job, and there's a bunch of other ones out there. And honestly, we just get the benefit of their work, and we can just implement our code as jobs. And then for the most part, we don't have to worry too much about doing those things ourselves. I actually haven't played too much with fibers and async myself for that reason. Mike Perham was talking about Raptors and how like the fundamental tools are really not there because they aren't necessarily like built where we can share the data across the Raptors or whatever. So I mean, that one seems like a fundamental flaw in the implementation of these things. But aside from that, I think people are then going to be working on it and making that something better. But other than that, I don't know. Yeah,
I think like the biggest answer, which you basically just said, is that the ecosystem for these fibers and async stuff is still maturing. It's kind of new. And most of us are kind of waiting for something more established. I've heard that there's things missing. I know that there's apparently issues. Like I've heard, so I don't know, things could have changed, but some issues with the global interpreter lock.
Python has one too. So
doesn't Ruby's GIL ensure only one thread executes at a time?
I think that's what happens in Python too.
Okay.
But I think there's been so much more focus in Python for data science than Ruby does that people just have not invested in Ruby the same way. Because the thing that you also have with Python is Guido, the guy who created Python, works for Google. And so he's got tons and tons of people able to help improve the language and add things around it. Whereas Ruby hasn't really had the same thing. Nowadays, we have Shopify doing that same type of thing for us. But that's more recent that Shopify has been going all in on improving Ruby itself and stuff. And so, and even then, it's kind of generally around Ruby performance, but still around Rails as the focus. And Ruby still doesn't have as much kind of generic usage. It's still heavy Rails or whatever. So I don't know if that's affected it too or not. But
Yeah, I think this article is very old, but it says you need to be careful when using C extensions with Fiber. I think maybe really the best answer for this is a lot of us are writing web applications, and our web applications don't need this like highly async stuff going on. And then when we do, we're using a background job. So
yeah, there's a ton of work going into Puma as well, but there's, is it Samuel Williams that works on
Falcon
and
which
stuff,
is
and
really cool.
Async?
Yes. That's
So-
what I would be trying. If I was interested in this, I would be trying Falcon for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Carmine had posted on X or something the other day about switching from Puma and Solid Queue and Solid Cache and stuff to Async and Falcon and Sidekick and stuff to take advantage of those things, which is awesome. So yeah, but I feel like there have been just generally fewer people putting the time in. And that could be just, you've got Google funding so much of that. And that could be the big difference over the years that has just been the focus of Ruby on Rails in general. And like background jobs are just less, like if you send an email a little, if it takes a little bit longer, then like not a big deal.
I literally said the other day, how important is it that this email gets delivered? In the grand scheme of things, is this really that important that we're spending all this time on that? But yeah, I mean, it depends on your customer, right?
Isn't that one of Nate Berkopec's recommendations, is like setting your queues by the expected like execution? These should be all immediate and then these should be slower or whatever. I can't remember if
I can't
he was the
remember.
one, but he's got good advice on organizing your queues and
Right.
all of that. We also highly recommend. And he's another person that, maintainer of Puma, spends a lot of time thinking about this stuff too. Good person to follow. This article I'll put in the notes, but this talks about Ruby rafters and lock-free data structures. And Mike Perham was talking about this as well.
It's really good.
Have you guys upgraded to Sidekick 8?
I have no idea.
So March 10th, Sidekick 8 came out, which is awesome. Current Sidekick enterprise customers are reporting a grand total of, what is this? Is that 1.8 trillion jobs processed? Yeah, almost 2 trillion jobs processed with Sidekick Enterprise. With my largest customer executing up to 250K jobs per second. That's insane.
That's wild.
That is nuts. So yeah, he's got a new web UI, which is awesome. Old one used to use Bootstrap 3. Yikes.
Good old days.
Anyways, that came out and he was talking about a Ractor thing as well. After months of work on 8.0, I've been trying to prototype a Ractor-based job system using Redis cluster so the system can scale to hundreds of Redises with minimal effort. The hardest part is Ractors. They are quite difficult to program as they don't allow lexical scope or closure variable access. I haven't yet figured out the code patterns necessary for them. I would call it a dialect of Ruby. To be fair, I think I had the same struggles when learning Go routines and channels. And Mike Perham posted that on March 11th. So not that long ago, but it's interesting to see that because that's something that we've heard a lot of over the years is like, we get fibers and we get Ractors and whatever. And those have been announced and like added to Ruby, but then I don't see them being used day to day. And like, maybe we don't need to use them ourselves and Sidekick internally does that or whatever job queue system for us. But it is really interesting to see that because if Mike is having trouble with that, then that means that we are definitely going to struggle with it. And maybe that's a sign that like the implementation will get a major change between now and like Ruby 4 or something in order to make that easier or whatever. Because it seems anti-Ruby's developer happiness goal if it's that much trouble, even for Mike to build stuff with Ractors. Well, that was longer than I expected. So we got a handful of extra questions that we'll do a part 2 of. Maybe we'll record that tomorrow and answer the rest of these.
Well, maybe we can send out the thing again and see.
Yeah, get some new ones.
Yeah, add any last minute ones. But dude, happy 300.
Dude.
I'm going to go kick
Congrats.
someone in the chest.
Is that how we celebrate?
This is Sparta, dude. I love that movie, dude. 300 is an amazing movie. If you've never seen 300, you're missing out. Oh my God.
I remember when it came out and it was just like everybody was talking about it.
Dude, we got to watch it in
I
school.
feel like it's so rare that I hear everybody talking about a movie anymore.
Yeah, no, that was an amazing movie. All right. Yeah. Well, dude, it was fun. I'll catch you next time.
In part 2.
Part 2. Peace.
See ya.